In today's Farm Report, knowing your costs on the dairy farm are important, especially if you want to keep your income high while maintaining your expenses. Jim Salfer with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office talks about how to keep track of your margins.
Today I'm going to talk about some of the costs and income numbers that you really should know on your dairy on a regular basis and really be thinking about them on, I would think, probably a daily basis. Say, okay, if I make this change or if I'm doing X, Y, and Z, how's that going to affect some of these numbers? Because these are the numbers that really drive profitability on most dairies. Obviously, the most important one is kind of income per cow per day. And notice I didn't say milk production per cow per day. It's really income per cow per day. I'm as guilty as anyone about asking how their cows are doing, but it really varies an awful lot. Some of these Jersey herds may not get a lot of milk per cow per day, but their income can be really good. You can keep your somatic cell count down, keep your quality down, or quality up. You can really generate more income per cow per day, and then equate that also to a total income per cow per day. So kind of the number of cows times income per cow per day gives you a total per day. Again, that's not a hard number to calculate. Think about your big costs on your dairy. The three really big costs, of course, feed costs is probably going to be 35 to 50% of your cost of production. Then it's replacement cost, which is really your cost of bringing in replacements minus your cull cow value. And cull cows have been really good for the last couple of years, so that number changes based on those two factors. And then, of course, your labor cost. And don't forget, that's just not hired labor. That also includes your labor and your family labor. So here's some of the other questions that you should be thinking about and asking yourself. Do you know what it costs you to raise a heifer? Because they can be really expensive, and that'll help you get the replacement costs. Think about what might your margin per hundredweight be. Even if you don't include every ideal cost, you could do a margin per hundredweight over feed cost, or maybe you want to include your replacement costs on that number. Do you know what your shrink or wastage is? We spend a lot of time chasing nickels from a feed cost standpoint, but oftentimes our biggest cost is waste. Do we know our break-even feed cost or break-even milk price? I think that's a really good number to be thinking about. And then think about what might be your projected margins over the next 6 months or the next 3 months. Even in smaller dairies, I think it's good to be thinking about that because it helps you plan your capital purchases a little better than if you don't understand those numbers. This has been Jim Salfer with the University of Minnesota Extension in St. Cloud.
An initiative connected to USDA's Conservation Reserve Program will soon be available to producers. Farm Service Agency Deputy Administrator Mike Schmidt says the initiative applies to conservation of working grasslands, rangelands, and pasture lands.
Grasslands is a new initiative. It's a working lands program instead of a strictly conservation program. So it's where you can continue to get sort of agricultural benefit on the land while you're also getting conservation benefit by responsible grazing of the land.
Schmidt says the new Grasslands initiative resembles the Grasslands Reserve Program, with those aspects rolled into CRP under the 2014 Farm Bill. Sign up for the CRP Grasslands Initiative begins on September 1st at local FSA offices, with applications accepted on an ongoing basis.
You can come in anytime after September 1st and make an offer under Grasslands, and then there'll be ranking periods, at least one per year. The first ranking period is going to be November 20th, so every application we get up to November 20th, and that first ranking will happen.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Knowing how to keep a business profitable is important, and one way to do that is to keep an eye on the future of the industry one is engaged in. Jim Salfer with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some insights into the future of the dairy industry.
Whatever your business you're in, I think one of the important aspects of managing that business is really thinking about what the future of that entire industry is. So it's kind of complicated. You've got to think about the entire future of the industry, and then you've also got to think about your specific business or what you're in. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the dairy industry. I don't have a crystal ball any more than anyone else, but if you look around a little bit, I think there's some trends that we should be thinking about that might be affecting your business. From an on-farm standpoint, I think we're going to continue to see more farms milked with robots. Some of those will be the box robots like we currently, the vast majority of the robots, but I think you're also going to see an explosion in the number of robotic parlor kind of dairies. There's some companies making retrofits. There's a number of other dairies that are coming in, and on top of that, you're going to see just more automation in general in all of agriculture and all of dairy. I think we're probably maybe feeding a little less forage in the future, partly because of the demand for human food for part of our land, and so we're going to continue to see, I think, a little more byproduct feeds that are out there, a little higher quality feed, but we've got to determine how we can get more and more feed off of our land. I think we're going to potentially see more outside capital coming into all of agriculture because it's just so expensive to get started. So I think you're going to see more models where you're going to see maybe some crop farmers or some outside capital help some of the young producers that have a lot of skills and have worked on a farm that maybe want to be part owners in a farm to start to really help them get started farming. From a marketing standpoint, it's clear now that we're in much more of a world market. The EU quota disappeared now in 2015. We can see their production is up, particularly in Ireland, and that long term will affect our markets, or at least has a potential to affect our markets as we try to get in the export. I think there's going to be a global growing demand. That's one good thing about dairy products. They're really in demand around the world. If you look at third world countries, one of the first things their governments want to do is increase their constituents or the people that live in that country, their consumption of dairy products, and that's one of the big reasons for China's increase. Dairy products are very nutritionally dense, which means they have an awful lot of nutrients for every calorie you consume and for the package that they're in, and so a lot of companies want those dairy products, and so there'll be an opportunity to expand in those markets, but we've got to understand there's a lot of other people competing for those markets too. So if you're out there milking cows or working in the dairy industry, I think these are really important thoughts to ponder, and right or wrong, I may be really off base, but I think it's important for you to think about where your dairy maybe fits in what you think the future of the dairy industry will be. This is Jim Selfer with the University of Minnesota Extension in St. Cloud.
For many diseases that hit commercial livestock herds or poultry flocks, diseases such as foot and mouth and avian influenza, there's really no way to control the spread of them except by destroying entire herds and flocks. At a congressional hearing, a frustrated Agriculture Department Chief Veterinarian Dr. John Clifford told lawmakers that somehow
we in the world have to stop eradicating diseases through the total destruction of animals and depopulation of animals. We need to find new ways to save animals and that protein for their families, for the owners, for the companies, for trade, for a lot of reasons, economics.
And he said the only way to do that is to put much more money and scientific effort into it. For bird flu, Dr. Clifford says one thing could be done in the future design of poultry houses, where there are several on one farm, to protect and isolate one house from the other.
So if you get the disease in one house, we can destroy 100,000 birds, not 3 million.
They had to put down $48 million in this last bout of bird flu. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.